Hey guys, I'm John Park and welcome to another tutorial series. In today's demonstration, I'm going to show you guys kind of my process in terms of designing and figuring out a layout drawing from start to finish. So let's get started. Alright, so for today's demonstration, in order to start our layout drawing, I actually want to bring in a program here. A very simple program, and some of you guys might know this. It's called SketchUp. And this is something that you can actually download off of Google. Just Google SketchUp. Allows you to kind of download this, student version or free trial version here. I like this program for many reasons. It's very friendly in terms of modeling, and we're able to kind of use the basis of this to kind of lay out our drawing or our space relatively quickly and easily, just using only nothing but primitives. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get started and actually start putting down some basic shapes for our layout. So I'm thinking for what I'm going for is going to be a relatively simple kind of structure. Something that has just a little bit of, something that feels slightly industrial. I definitely want some cool like platforms or something. So I'm gonna just go ahead and sketch out a couple of things that can allow us to do that, and you'll find that I'm actually using nothing but very, very simple shapes to do this. And I'm actually going to use the pencil tool here in order to modify our object, and this is what it gives me so much flexibility to modify and come up with really nice shapes and also just a nice base to work off of. Okay, there's a lot of really great resources online. Most of what I learned on Google SketchUp was on YouTube, and I've been using this for a lot of simple geometry and simple blockouts for my workflow. It's a great tool for just doing really quick concepts for video games or layouts or whatever it is that you really need it for. So I highly recommend using this tool or using this program for just that. So this is a lot of really great programs out there, and this is one of the first ones that I actually picked up for doing really simple 3D. So here you can see that I'm actually using just simple blockouts to really develop our space here. And as you can see, I'm actually starting to get some really nice forms and nice shapes, and start building out a nice kind of area for us to really draw on top of. And I don't want to get too complex here. I just kind of want to build out some simple things, some simple geometry, and I'm treating this more or less kind of like Legos, if I were to put it really simply. And I just want to have fun with just some of these shapes and just kind of see what we can do to explore and come up with some really cool forms here. Okay, so with this, I'm gonna go ahead and just kind of pick out a nice little angle here, and I'm actually using the hand tool and the middle and this little tool right here where I can orbit around, and I can actually choose different angles and different shots. And what's great is anytime I want to move a wall in order to get a more clear open shot, I can easily do that, right? Just by toggling some of these geoforms back and forth. It's such a friendly program. I highly recommend it for anyone who's really interested in using this program. If you're not comfortable with 3D, and I know 3D is relatively kind of new to everyone, I highly recommend trying out using just basic perspective to block out your shapes. And that's kind of the basis of how I actually start off a lot of these line drawings, is just simple blockouts in geometry. Okay, so I'm just gonna find a nice little angle here for us to draw on top of. I'm gonna go ahead and actually go into camera mode and pick the 2-point perspective. This will actually kind of make the shot a little bit more dynamic I'm gonna go ahead and kind of lower it a little bit so we can get kind of like a nice up angle and go to a 2-point perspective. It should give us a nice little kind of convergence here. Okay, cool. Alright, I definitely like how this is looking. You know, this is what I'm thinking is kind of like a sci-fi facility of some sort. So let's go ahead and print screen this. Okay, and then we're gonna close this out, and I'm gonna go ahead and open up a file, a working or drawing file of around 4,000 to 5,000 by 2,000 in height. So if I go to 4,000, it's roughly almost 2,000 in height by 4,000 pixels. Okay, this is, you know, it doesn't have to be exact, but I generally like going a little bit more landscape like this, so that there's a lot of playing room and also we can get in some nice details. So I'm going to go ahead and import our little print screen and grab our little 3D mock-up here and actually use this as a basis for our drawing. I'm going to center right here. Okay, cool. So after this point, before we actually get started on the drawing, one thing I just want to ensure of is making sure we're very clear about the type of tools we're using for Photoshop. Okay, I did a really quick run through of SketchUp, and I know a lot of the tools weren't explained, but mess around with it, play with the tools. It's really simple, and there's a lot of great tutorials on YouTube. But in terms of Photoshop, we're not going to get into too much technical painting. We're going to get into the actual drawing aspect. So I like to actually use 100% flat brush here. This is kind of what it looks like. Okay, this is 100% with no opacity, no kind of vignetting or shape dynamics. It's just 100%. And I like the flat end of the brush only because it gives me a nice kind of like marker look to it. Okay, I like to typically draw with anywhere from 3 to 5 pixels just in drawing. Okay, or 2 to 5 pixels, sorry, in drawing. And when I need to do my darker outlines, I'll actually use 5 and above, okay, to do my darker outlines of certain objects to really punch it out. But for the most part, drawing out our ideas, I'm going to use anywhere from 2 to about 5 at most. Okay, so with that, here I have my underlay, and I'm going to go ahead and just kind of lower the opacity here. And already we can start to imagine what this space is going to look like. But before we go and start just drawing it out, we want to be sure what our direction is. So if I have a space like this, right, that kind of looks like there's a ramp here. We have some sort of ramp, some sort of like deck. We have a wall and wall 2, wall 3, and there's another wall, wall 4. Okay, there's a lot of walls, right? It's kind of like, holy shit, there's so many walls, and there's a ramp and a deck. Not that interesting. So we got to give it some sort of context. So what do? Well, maybe, just maybe, there's a door of some sort. Granted, we didn't model the door, and again, I didn't anticipate on that, but maybe there's some sort of door here that this deck leads up to, or this ramp leads up to on top of this deck, right? So maybe that's what we're going to be designing today, is some sort of sci-fi themed kind of facility with a ramp, with a very clear ramp, with a door and all these little components and stuff around. Okay, so a lot of times before I even get into the drawing, I like to just do a couple warm-ups. And in the warm-up phase, I want you guys to just kind of loosen up a little bit. Okay, just do some straight lines, point to point. Just try to get accurate. Now in Photoshop, it's relatively easy to do straight lines only because you hit shift click, but try to literally just practice your muscle. Okay, and draw straight lines, only because, you know, this will allow us or force us to actually be a little bit more in tune with our eye and hand coordination. And next thing we're going to do is curves. And I just like to do kind of these backward S's. Okay, and just kind of follow and repeat the forms over and over again. Okay, so these practices will kind of get, it's kind of our daily stretches. This is what kind of gets us going, and it gets us kind of into the groove of drawing. I even like doing ellipses here to kind of do these little quick studies. Or circles. More curves and more straight lines. Okay, so be sure to do this before you get into the groove of drawing, because again, we want to be nice and warmed up before we get into the actual complex aspects of our drawing here. All right, so opening this this file here, I definitely identified just some basic things. Now I want to go ahead and start planning out. I have walls, a deck, a ramp, and a door. There's a lot of components here. There's a lot of things for us to deal with, and more importantly, there's quite a bit of planning to do, right? So the first thing that I actually want to do is, you know, think about, well, what is sci-fi to us? You know, what are some existing sci-fi things that we've seen, or that we kind of think about when we hear the term sci-fi? Well, the first thing that I generally think about is Halo, right? Halo is one of those bigger franchise games. Halo 5 just came out, and when I look at this game, and I look at the kind of design language and the world, everything kind of has a really nice feel to it, right? There's a lot of cool panels. Let's look up Halo 5 or Halo environments. There's a lot of great panels and kind of a really interesting aesthetic. There's pipes, panels, you know, these kind of forms. There's handrails, and there's a lot of exposed structures that kind of give it that look, right? And if you look around, there's a lot of interesting things that kind of give it a really industrial look, but it's still techie, and that's something that I definitely want to keep note of, especially for you know, if I'm going to do something that's sci-fi like Halo. If you look at other games like Dead Space, you'll find that there's a lot of environments. There's a lot of similar type of techie languages, but theirs is a lot more rectangular, right? Not too many cylinders, but there's a lot more rectilinear forms, and everything's kind of more of a right angle, right? So that's kind of their design language. And the most important thing, the very most important thing that we have to identify is the language. You know, what is our environment, or what is our kind of materials made up of? Even though there's all these different types of panels and things like that, we need to start defining that language, right? So I'm definitely leaning more towards kind of the Halo kind of environments myself. I'm just a big time fan of it, but I think there's a lot of wiggle room for cool architecture and forms. Like, look at this form here. That's so cool. There's kind of a nice simple but complex vibe to it. There's something really nice and well designed about it. Even this here, there's a really nice feel. So let's go ahead and actually plan this out. Okay, so we have obviously our form here, and I'm just going to go ahead and mark this red by clicking right click on our layer and go to red. Alright, and here's our notes. I'm just gonna title this as notes and warm-ups here. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is before we even get into it, let's go ahead and just design out what is a wall. Wall 1. Let's go ahead and pick a better font here. Okay, we have wall 1 concept. Now, for a wall, I just want to think very graphic, and I want to think, you know, sci-fi. And when we look at some of the walls from the research, we can just imagine simple graphic shapes like this, right? That kind of cut across, and almost that can be a wall in itself. This is a really simple design. However, I want to keep in mind the type of design that I want to go for is not only sci-fi, right? It's not only is it sci-fi, but it's going to have panels, pipes, vents, buttons, and cut lines, right? I guess panels and cut lines are really similar. But these are some of the things that I definitely want to implement into my wall design, right? So with that said, I'm just going to go ahead and kind of draw out just some really simple wall panels. That kind of fall into the category of that. And I don't want to go too even. I kind of want to space things out so it has a slightly more interesting look to it. Okay. And you can see that it starts off really simple. And now I want to add some pipes. You know, where can I add some interesting pipes? Maybe it starts off here in the corner. Now, for those of you who are doing something that's not sci-fi related and something that's a little bit more culturally themed and more realistic, such as, you know, an existing architecture, whether it's Roman, Japanese, or even Gothic, you know, a lot of this stuff will come a lot easier when you do some research, right? But since it's sci-fi, you know, I don't necessarily have an existing research other than, you know, an existing video game IP such as Halo or maybe even NASA, right? That's kind of the closest thing that I have. And I just kind of want to keep this relatively interesting enough, but not overly complicated. I want to keep in mind some of these really simple ideas of panels, pipes, vents, buttons, and cut lines, right? So now I have vents here. Let's go ahead and draw some vents. And what's great about Photoshop is that you only really need to draw it once, because you can actually duplicate simple things like vents. And there you go. Now I have vents. Done. Right? And then from here, I can just go ahead and just kind of edit down whatever I don't need. And there you go. I have a simple vent here. And then some buttons. Maybe this can be kind of like my little sci-fi button area. I'm thinking about like some sort of control button panel. Okay. And the next thing is cut lines. Right? Cut lines are basically things that are going to help divide my space a little bit, but give it just a little bit of a manufacturing look, because I already have panels and stuff. But cut lines kind of give it the overall concept that it's been composed or prefabricated by more than just one single piece, that it actually takes multiple pieces to create a wall, right? I know it gets a little technical, but the concept of that is basically if I have a line that cuts here, then I can effectively have it so it actually cuts this way, and this is in effect a cut line. You know, it took basically two parts to now make this wall. Now obviously this is perfectly divided in the center, and it kind of makes everything look very even. So I'm going to go ahead and just make another third cut here, maybe somewhere right down here, just to give it another level of division. Maybe something like that, and maybe we can even cut this wall just by another section. And maybe just for kicks, we can actually give this a little vent. All right, put some vents everywhere. No, just kidding. But you know, it starts to kind of come together. We have all of these elements. We have panels, pipes, vents, buttons, and cut lines. Now this is starting to look and have that sci-fi feel, right? So now that we've kind of achieved our first wall, let's go ahead and with our second wall design. So I'm going to duplicate this, and this time, instead of me just completely drawing one from scratch again, I'm actually going to go ahead and use this and kind of Frankenstein it a bit. I'm going to take this here, and I'm going to rotate it, flip it around, and I'm going to do something like this. I'm going to start combining elements, but still using the same motif, as you can see, to start coming up with different variations of walls. And you can already see there's a lot of really cool designs and stuff happening here. There's obviously a lot of symmetry, which I'm going to try my best to break or try to eliminate. I don't want too much symmetry. I think symmetry is something that just naturally happens in design, because we tend to, as I guess as humans, we tend to like to organize things very evenly. So we gotta always constantly be a little bit aware of when we're doing this. Okay, I'm gonna add in these little manufacturing divots. Okay, this adds for a nice little flavor of detail. Okay, and there you go. We have wall number 2, right? Pretty simple, pretty easy. once you start kind of getting the hang of, you know, designing one wall, you can actually design all the walls, right? But we're just gonna go ahead and just kind of start pre-planning all this stuff out so that when we get to our actual design phase, it's relatively easier. Just gonna go ahead and even sculpt or draw just a little bit more detail here. Something like that, right? Now this is actually pretty cool. This is, oh, let's go ahead and save this out. Call it the line drawing demo. Now that we have wall 1 and now effectively we have wall number 2, right? Now we have 2 walls that we can actually work with and that we've kind of established. When we go to our notes, we have up to 4 different walls. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm just going to duplicate this and try to find opportunities to come up with different panels just using our existing texture here. So I'm going to copy paste this and Frankenstein it again, okay, using what we have, and this time I'm going to just use parts of it and see if we can actually come up with something a bit more unusual and a little bit more interesting just by combining it this way. And now we have something really complex. You know, we have a really complicated looking structure just by purely combining the two in quarters, right? So interesting. It easily becomes such an intricate looking design language when we start to combine these elements. You know, it starts to get really intricate really quickly. I'm gonna go ahead and just duplicate this over. Using a little bit of the smudge brush here. And again, it still has a lot of the elements that we've kind of retained from our original panel. It's got the vents. It doesn't have the pipes or anything yet, but we have it in 2 of them, so I'm actually okay not having pipes in this one. But it has the cut lines, the panels, and the vents. So this can be one other wall. Something completely different. Let's just go ahead and straighten this out. And I'm using the smudge tool here. This is great for anyone that wants to make adjustments really quickly. You can actually smudge the lines around to make some really quick edits. And there you go. We have another wall. Done. Right? You see how easy it gets? It's totally cheating, and that's what I love about this. Okay, so this is wall number 3. Alright, so I'm gonna just keep it at these 3 for now. I think we have plenty of walls that we can refer to. We have wall number 1, 2, and 3, and we have our general keywords. If I need to create more, I know that I can combine them and find really unique variations, but I think this will be a good enough starting point for us to start drawing on top. Okay, let's go ahead and save this out. I just want to make sure that you guys have this saved out so we can refer to it. Alright, now we have our drawing. So basic notes, we have wall, ramp, deck, and wall. Okay, the ramps and the door are something that's really unique, and same with the deck. Since they're not walls, I'm gonna actually take the liberty of designing these elements out on top of this 3D block out. Okay, I'm not gonna rely too much on the actual textures or these walls that we created just yet. I actually want to take the opportunity to actually try to design this out, you know, by hand. So go ahead and keep our line drawing at anywhere from 2 to 3 pixels, or 2 to 5 pixels. And I'm just going to go ahead and just start drawing on top of this layer. Make sure that this layer is locked, that we don't accidentally draw on that layer. And I'm just going to go ahead and actually start thinking about how we can make this look interesting, right? I mean, it's a deck, for crying out loud, but what can we do that makes this look interesting? Maybe this is some sort of, you know, it's obviously a sci-fi facility, but maybe it's something that has, you know, something really, you know, it harvests or has some sort of like energy inside. So I'm gonna show a little bit of just some vents and things like that has some indication that this isn't just a normal industrial looking, you know, structure, that it has something special in it or embedded into this wall of some sort. If it doesn't, then, you know, it can just maintain as a really simple kind of, you know, sci-fi kind of wall structure. But, you know, these are all things that we need to constantly ask ourselves when we're designing, is what is this used for? Right? And obviously this is sci-fi, so I'm assuming that a lot of these forms have been prefabricated and shipped over and reassembled. And again, pipes and panels is definitely a design language that I know that it's going to exist in this world. So I want to utilize that as much as we can and just kind of put it in these areas. Okay, maybe this is like some sort of like battery unit. It's got some like brackets or something to hold this pipe system down or something. Again, maybe this panel something like that. And again, this is a ramp, right? Maybe, you know, is it a ramp or is it a stair? You know, what is it? And these are some things that, you know, we have to constantly just ask ourselves. If it's a stairway, then we got to add stairs. If it's just a ramp for vehicles, or just for, you know, a simple ramp so that we can upload vehicles, then we need to make sure that that stuff is relatively clear. I'm thinking maybe some sort of like attachment here onto this platform. Okay, maybe this here is some sort of barrel looking thing, but I'm gonna actually just go ahead and leave that portion out. I'm not too keen on that particular type of design per se. I do want to maybe add something here. I feel like it's a bit empty. Even though this is a deck, maybe just some indication of like some, again, more pipes or something that speaks of it to be industrial and kind of like more sci-fi. So let's just go ahead and add those elements here. One thing that I want to keep in mind is I don't want to get too detailed using texture. If I'm gonna get detail, I want to make sure that it's detail that explains what the object is, not necessarily what the object is made up of. So if it's made up of wood, I'm not going to try to draw every wood grain. I just want to make sure that, you know, whatever the object is, whether it's pipes, I'm going to draw out pipes. Okay, something there. Alright, now let's do the door here. I'm going to put a different layer on top because I want to try out different options for doors. But I think it might be cool if it was kind of a relatively larger type of hanger door. Something that kind of had like some really cool opening and maybe just a little bit of indication of, you know, some locking mechanism. And again, I kind of want to go with that whole sci-fi Halo theme, so, you know, it's going to have a lot of kind of roundish radiuses on these, like, even on these boxes. So that's something that I definitely want to try to implement or keep in mind as I'm drawing. Okay. And again, having this on a separate layer allows me to make adjustments if I don't necessarily like, you know, what I'm doing with my design here. But again, this is just it's all part of design. It's kind of we gotta do a lot of trial and error, and we gotta see what we like, right? So maybe I want to do some sort of compression door here. Of some sort. Maybe here there's some sort of like sci-fi kind of sensor here built in to the top. And again, this is a really huge part of my design. So I want to make this door as cool as I can. Right? It's not just going to be a simple, just a door that slides open and close, but I want to have some interesting elements about it that can really sell this concept, but at least kind of give it some sort of visual worth, that it's interesting to look at it and it's interesting to interact with it and even walk up to it, you know. if this is in the realm of like a video game universe. Maybe there's like some sort of like sensor or something. Okay, might be cool to have kind of this triangular language. I'm just going to go ahead and draw this out in a separate layer. Maybe something like that, just for some additional sci-fi kind of paneling and texture. Totally trying out to see if that that's worthy. It might look a little too busy, but you know, maybe we can make it smaller. But I mean, it doesn't necessarily bug me too much. I mean, I think it's okay. It's not bad. Let's try that out. Okay, that's kind of cool. Definitely works out not too bad. I'm gonna go ahead and actually take this piece here, and I'm gonna go ahead and put it in our little reference folder of goods, so that I can always refer back to this little piece if we need. This is a really cool little language here. Okay, maybe we can add just something interesting up here as kind of this being the main door frame. Again, this is our main focal point. So I definitely want to add a lot of interest here and a lot of population, meaning a lot of visual coolness. When it comes to like putting panels here, I definitely want to keep in mind the concept of thirds, or the concept of large, medium, and small. Okay? Because it's very easy to break things up and make it really, really equal. I don't want to do that, because it's going to make our designs very, very stagnant really quickly. Okay, so this is what we have so far. It's not too bad. I'm definitely liking kind of the general design direction that I'm going with this. I think there's an opportunity here to kind of build a lot of this stuff out. So we're going to go ahead and continue this. And I'm actually going to go ahead and just collapse these. I definitely like the design of the door, so I'm going to commit and collapse this and just continue building out. All this other stuff here, I always like to kind of take it a step at a time, meaning, you know, instead of just randomly drawing what we think it might be, I like to just kind of ask myself, well, what could this be? And, you know, to kind of build off of it, I think it might be cool if this is some sort of like kind of a station that overhangs and looks at this area, or it can be that, or it can be a really cool looking kind of motor or some sort of battery facility that's all connected down, right? So there's a lot of opportunity and visual play that we can actually create with this. So let's try that. Let's try to make this a little bit more of a kind of more industrial, because I think in the Halo world there's already a lot of buildings, and I'd love to see just a little bit more. I would like to develop a little bit more of the mechanical industrial kind of feel for myself. And a lot of times, you know, when you're using, you know, perspective or these 3D blockouts to draw, you don't have to necessarily stick with the geometry. You can actually break out of it and come up with your own, right? The geometry is really just there to kind of help, you know, guide the visual, you know, be a visual aid, you know, for kind of blocking in a really cool design. A lot of times, you know, you just kind of want the freedom to break out of it. I'm gonna go ahead and draw some ellipses here. I also like to put these on like anywhere from 1 to 2 pixels, you know, for the weight here. And you can see already how thick it is, right? So that's 2 pixels, and I'm gonna go ahead and do it on 1. And you can see that it comes up still relatively, you know, fairly thick. I think it might be really neat or cool to have kind of these barrels or some sort of canister look to it. Okay, maybe something like that. That's kind of cool. Follow the general perspective here. I'm gonna go ahead and just kind of draw and deck this out a little bit. Start to imply some cool detail. And a lot of times, like when I start working on one element and I know that it's gonna repeat, just draw it out in one and then just use that same one and repeat it to the other ones. Maybe like that, you know? It could get a little monotonous, meaning like very repetitive. So a lot of times, in order to avoid that, I like to always just kind of switch it up just a little bit and even add just something that kind of slightly changes the visual language of it. So even like a brace of some sort here. Again, you'll find that as I'm actually designing this stuff, you know, we did create those wall panels, and I'm going to start to implement them very shortly. But I definitely, for things that are relatively unique, I definitely want to take the opportunity to kind of draw and put enough, a lot of our own custom design and feel to it, without necessarily having to rely on the props or the wall assets that we created. Okay, something like that. It's looking cool. Put a decent amount of little detail here. Maybe some sort of like wall detail or a door detail here for this simple kind of door. Now you'll always find me kind of slightly erasing away and re-adding in details, because I want to make sure I kind of have a nice healthy balance of shapes. Without getting too busy. I'm constantly going back and forth. Okay, that's kind of cool. All right. Okay, so This is relatively kind of where we're at right now in terms of what we customly drew. Okay, it's still it's a pretty simple kind of generalized block out. Again, there's things that I would do to kind of give it a more of a less rectilinear feel by kind of giving this a slight radius and also giving things nice kind of, sci-fi, languages, like kind of how it turns and stuff like that. So let's go ahead and just add that in. Again, the scaling of this, everything's going to be based off of a door or a window, right? So immediately what I did here is I've already added scale purely by adding this door. And this door tells us that a human or a character is going to be about this tall, right? So let's go ahead and just add that in, so there's no confusion here. Because a lot of times when I see a lot of artwork or designs, the scale is always off, right? So whenever you feel that, just go ahead and add a little character here, just to kind of remind us of what our relative scale is to everything. And you'll find things that are really, really big or too small to interact with. So if this is our little guy here, we can start to kind of place this character everywhere, right? In perspective here, and even way up here for distance, and way over here, right? And this gives us a really good idea in terms of the general size of how big these things should be, or if these things are too small, you know what I mean, or too big. So this gives us a really good idea or concept of like what to do when we want to add, let's say, a railing, right? A railing is going to be up to kind of, waist high. So if that's the case, let's actually make these guys a little smaller. I feel like they're still slightly too big. So I'm going to make this guy a little bit smaller. That's right, that's right. This guy will probably be a little bit smaller as well. Same with this guy up here. Be a lot smaller. And now I'm just kind of randomly placing these guys in the scene, just so that I can be reminded of, how big they are. There's no right or wrong to where you can place them. You just gotta have them, just as a reminder. But now this kind of gives us a really good scale idea for if we have, simple things like handrails, right? And this simple concept of a handrail is so effective because it tells us, or it informs us of the relative human scale or human height. Okay, now if you don't want to drive yourself nuts and have to draw all the handrails, what I like to do is always draw a handrail in perspective, or not in perspective, I mean in flat view, then put it in perspective, because at least this way we're able to use this and duplicate it as needed. And it looks fairly consistent when we do that. Alright, so when I do this, I can shrink it down and kind of add it in perspective as needed. Right? This instantly gives us kind of the opportunity to place things accurately, and also to be very, very consistent as well. Okay, let's go ahead and put this handrail in our little texture bag. Okay. All right, so now we're about an hour in, and I'm gonna introduce our little walls here and start using them. I'm gonna go ahead and color code my walls so that I can easily distinguish them. Let's do that. Green and blue. Okay. So I think it might be cool to start off with the green, duplicate it, bring it over, and we can see immediately where we can fit this. Like if I put this here, you can see how it instantly starts the details off, right? Put in perspective, just follow the general shapes, right? Not too bad, right? It works. It definitely works. So I'm going to go ahead and mirror this or continue this over and see if there's another area where we can use this. Let's go ahead and bring this again. I think I want to plug this in right here. There's a really cool little spot for it. And I'm just following the perspective forms or direction. And there you go. Done. This is like the most effective way of drawing. And you literally see how quick I'm doing this. Right? The prep work of this took a while. However, the end result is we don't have to draw all these details, and we just get all this stuff for free. There you go. All right, now let's bring in the other walls. Let's bring in this one here. This is pretty cool. Just quite a bit of detail. Definitely like the amount of information there is on this one here. Again, the cool thing about this is that you don't have to use it the way it was drawn out. You can use parts of it in a different angle. You know, I can use it this way and it works. You know, it's pretty effective. I can put it on this corner here. And see how it works. There you go. And that works too. It's the craziest thing. It just, if it looks right to you and you feel that it has a nice balance of details, then it works, you know? Because this is where we're going to use our judgment of placement and detail for this set dressing mode. Okay, let's go ahead and add this little piece here to our little little battery wall thing. I'm gonna add this blue wall panel now. Maybe to the floor. Maybe this might be a really good floor texture. Let's do this. Let's go ahead and duplicate this. And see what we get. Sometimes it works, sometimes it might be too busy, but it's definitely worth a shot, you know? And a lot of times, I always like to kind of crunch it all the way down and see how it looks. And you can instantly tell if it's too busy. Like if I do that, notice it just kind of, there's a certain look to it. It's kind of like, it's okay. But what if I just kind of did it a little bit more spread out, so it doesn't get too noisy, and it still retains a nice kind of, you know, resolution of detail, but it doesn't kind of get too textury. That's the thing that I'm constantly trying to keep in mind, is making sure our designs have a nice visual balance. And there you go. That's actually working pretty good. I definitely like that better. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and use this again. And this time, let's use this for the ground. Okay? So I'm gonna duplicate it, flip it over the other way. And this time I'm gonna give it a little bit of space. And I'm gonna go ahead and use this for the base of our entire ground here. And do that. And put it in perspective here. And see how that looks. Yeah, it's not looking too bad. That totally works, right? Look at that. That totally works. Just want to make sure that it's following the general perspective. So you may have to kind of stretch it out a bit and just make sure that the lines are converging the correct way. Otherwise, it will look completely off. Okay. Where's our little guys here? Let's turn our little guys off. Alright. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just copy this over so you guys have it as a little group, and I'm going to go ahead and actually converge all this stuff down into one master line drawing file. That way I can actually go and edit, draw on top, add things, and do what I think, you know, it might need to kind of help make this slightly different. Let's see here. Don't like the box of that, so I'm just gonna change it up a little bit here. And maybe this thing here, like maybe it doesn't have to be a box. Maybe it can be some sort of like shape that it kind of vignettes into the main structure. Again, that Halo language is relatively, everything's kind of like this nice, like cool rounded form, so I definitely don't want to get way too much, you know, rectilinear with everything, because it's gonna lose that essence, that feel. Okay. And typically, a lot of times, you know, when you do this kind of work in production houses, a lot of this stuff actually takes quite a bit of time. So, you know, try not to, you know, rush yourself in doing this. You know, in theory, a lot of this stuff is supposed to take at least a few hours to a couple days, really. Okay, there's a couple of things I'm going to just clean up. These little lines here. Because they're not transparent bars, but definitely want to make sure that they're relatively clean and stand as independent structures. Do that. And just for kicks, let's just add like a number like sec 05 or something, or 7, sector 7. So sci-fi. All right, let's try to find a font that feels cool. That was actually kind of neat. This actually. Let's find something that's a little bit more bolder. That's not bad. Okay, I'm going to enlarge it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just duplicate this, and I'm actually going to press Control and click the layer, so it's going to give me a nice selection. Create a new layer. And I'm going to go under the marquee tool, and I'm going to right click, and I'm just going to stroke for 1 pixel, and that should give me a nice little stroke here. If we want, we can go to even 2 pixels to kind of thicken it up. And what I always like to do here is I like to kind of like mess it up, you know. I don't like to keep it as the original font per se. So I like to just kind of add in our own little, you know, design here. Even if it's something as simple or as cheesy as kind of breaking it up like this. This gives us kind of like a nice little fakey design here. So I'm gonna go ahead and duplicate it, put it in our little texture bag, just in case next time we want to use this this logo. I can go ahead and use that again. I'm just gonna go ahead and kind of place it around and see where this can fit in a cool way. Maybe here or something. Kind of cool. Okay, so there you have it. Our finished line drawing. Let's go ahead and turn off the layer underneath. Okay. And since, you know, the borders and stuff are a little empty, I'm just going to go ahead and enlarge the drawing to fill it up. Fill up the edges here. Just for compositional reasons. Well, there you have it. You know, something sci-fi, kind of fits into the realm of this Halo-esque kind of environment. You know, and starting with our little SketchUp drawing, just kind of showing you what we have here. Let me bring this up here. This is kind of what we originally started with. And this is where we ended. Okay. Now the next thing I want to quickly talk about is our line weight. Now I did draw this with relatively one line weight in mind, which is anywhere from 2 to 5. All right. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm just going to duplicate it, and this is instantly going to beef everything up. It almost makes it around a 5 just by duplicating this. And I'm going to create a mask. Okay. And I'm going to hide it. And I'm only going to use or reveal thicker line weights in our focal area, which is generally going to be here by the little staircase. Okay. Just going to reveal just a little bit of a thicker line weight here. And most importantly, I want to reveal line weights around the silhouette of these buildings and anything that has a very clear overlap. Okay, so you can just see that I'm just going to kind of beef up some of this stuff just a tad bit. But I don't want to thicken all this up. I guess I can do it just a little bit, but I don't want to do it too much because it can get really cartoony. And it just kind of kills the overall line quality. We want to preserve that. Alright. Okay, let's go ahead and copy that over. Just kind of look at it and just see if there's anything else that we can add maybe. Definitely like this number 7. So I want to see if I can add this again. Maybe here. Just as like a secondary kind of graphic or something. Okay, and also let's just go ahead and just kind of go in there and add any other little random miscellaneous things. Okay, and gotta have that cool sci-fi window looking deal. So let's go ahead and add that actually. Totally forgot to give. Right now I only have a sci-fi door, but no indication of a window. Kind of like how this one kind of stayed simple. Maybe we don't need anything here. I'll just keep it simple. So adding these vertical lines here. This kind of helps spell out anything that's kind of turning towards the contour of the building. Kind of gives it a nice aesthetic. It might make it feel slightly retro, but you know what? I kind of like it. You know, so I'm gonna put it in for our design here. Trying to see if there's anywhere else I need to add that thing. Alright, well there you have it, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this demo. Let me know if you guys have any questions. You guys can also email me at jp4johnpark@gmail.com. Gmail.com. There we go. Not the little arrow. There you go. Jeez. Alright. Gmail.com. Thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you guys next time.